Jada Pickett Smith, Her Grand Delusions, Part 2. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I'm continuing to examine an interview that took place in the Times newspaper involving Jada Pickett Smith, as it enables you to understand more of her narcissism writ large. The interview tells us she was born in Baltimore, Maryland, when her mother Adrienne was only 17. Her parents divorced soon after, and Pinkett Smith was especially close to her maternal grandparents, who taught her the importance of hard work. But by the time she was 14, she had lost her virginity and was soon dealing cocaine. Criminality, lack of accountability. Meanwhile, her mother was a high-functioning heroin addict, working as a nurse by nights and getting high and selling drugs the rest of the time. It's likely that Jada Pinkett Smith's mother was the narcissist that created the genetic predisposition in Jada Pinkett Smith herself, and also created the lack of control environment. Being an African American, unfortunately, that was not an unusual experience. A lot of us that you'll talk to in this industry, whether they are open about it or not, we've all touched that realm. Whether we've dealt drugs, did drugs, had parents that were addicts, siblings, we've all been touched by the street pharmacy, she says. Now, it's also noteworthy that not all, but many of those individuals will be narcissists themselves, who of course have been drawn to the honeypot, which is the entertainment industry. As I've explained to you elsewhere, there are certain places in the world, certain fields, certain industries, certain professions that prove particularly attractive to narcissists. Politics is an obvious one, and the entertainment industry is another. And therefore it's no surprise that Jada Pinkett Smith has dealt with people of the descriptions that she has mentioned there, because they will be drawn to the entertainment industry, just as she was. This experience, Pinkett Smith writes, prepared her for Hollywood in terms of dealing with predators, i.e. other narcissists, and refusing to be ripped off financially, necessity of nullification of threat to control. In the late 1990s, she turned down a role in the film Bulworth, a political satire written and directed by Warren Beatty, because she told Beatty she thought the script was culturally inauthentic. Beatty took her out for lunch the next day. He told me, "You don't have to be so defensive with a chip on your shoulder." And it was good because, coming from the streets of Baltimore, I'm looking at everything like it's a war. This isn't the fact of her being from the streets, it's the fact of, although she was, it's her narcissism at work, which is causing her to look at everything from a warlike perspective because of her hypersensitivity to control. He said, "You can relax a little, okay?" And I thought that was beautiful. Hale Berry took the role. Bulworth was later criticised for reinforcing black stereotypes. How did she tell her children about her drug-dealing past? Oh, that was easy. Part of the reason my children and I are so close is I've always presented myself to them as a human first, sharing my stories with them so they could see my humanity. Lack of accountability, parental abrogation of responsibilities and duties. She puts herself there as a human being and a friend rather than a parent. Again, her sense of entitlement and self-absorption causes her to believe that it is more important for her to present herself as a human first, sharing her stories, than actually doing the right thing in terms of parenting them. Despite all the problems in her childhood home, she worked hard at school and graduated. One of her closest school friends was the rapper Tupac Shakur, but she emphasizes in the book that their relationship was never sexual. We just never had that kind of attraction. And the one time when he did kiss me, it just felt pretty disgusting, I gotta say, she says. After high school, she and Shakur separately made their way to Los Angeles, where he pursued music and she broke into acting, landing a role on A Different World, a spin-off sitcom from The Cosby Show. She and Shakur looked out for each other, and as his career took off, he introduced her to people such as the directors, Alan and Albert Hughes, who in 1993 cast her in Menace to Society. Later that year, Shakur was charged with sexually assaulting a fan, Ayanna Jackson, which he denied. He was found guilty and convicted. Pinkett Smith says that prominent black feminists told her to disown him. "But he was my brother. I wasn't going to abandon him," she writes in Worthy. Now, you might think that showing some loyalty in that regard is demonstrative of emotional empathy. It isn't. We know that she is a narcissist, and her loyalty was born out of the fact that her narcissism saw that it was advantageous for her to continue to have an involvement with him rather than abandon him. Does she still think that was the right decision? I did not know Pack to be a liar, ever, she says. It's evident that she idolised that individual and continued to do so. And of course, he was not in a position to be extensively devalued because, as you know, he died. Shakur was released after 9 months. Less than a year later, he was shot in Las Vegas and died 6 days later. No one at the time was prosecuted. By chance, 2 days after our interview, Duane Davis was charged in connection with Shakur's murder. I emailed Pinkett Smith to ask how she feels about this extremely belated development. Now that an arrest has been made around Tupac's murder, I'm hoping we'll get some closure, she writes straight back. She met Will Smith when she auditioned to play his girlfriend on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. She did not get the part, but in 1995, after Smith got divorced from his first wife, he called her and they were soon dating. It's hard to think of two 90s rappers more different than Smith and Shakur. Did Shakur ever laugh at her for dating the Fresh Prince? No. Actually, any other time I was dating someone, he had a lot to say, and not very good things. But he never said anything about Will, which led me to believe he approved, she says. Their courtship sounds extremely heady, with Smith taking her by private jet for surprise weekends away and so on. All of that would have appealed to the grandiosity of the narcissist. Yet she writes it was his intelligence that made her fall for him. 2 years later, when she was 25, after a night that she writes left them breathing hard post-passion, she became pregnant with Jaden. Smith proposed and she accepted, but refused to sign the prenup. If she had signed that, she writes in Worthy, divorce might have been a reality. Blame-shifting, assertion of control. Does she really think not having a prenup later saved them from divorce? What I was trying to say was that I made a promise there would be no reason to ever have a prenup, because I would always be willing to work it out, she says. In the book, she writes that she and Smith are both adamantly against divorce. From her perspective, of course, this is done because it enables her to continue to control an individual even if the relationship is not continuing. Well, but what's the difference between being separated and being divorced? Well, we needed the time. Will and I got married at an early age, and we were able to make some beautiful things and some not so beautiful things. We got to a place where we had to go our separate ways in order to break from some of those more immature fantasies of what being married was about. And bear in mind, when we had that separation in 2016, revision of history, the goal was to divorce, but divorce just didn't feel right for either of us. We don't know why, but here we are. They are still close enough to feature regularly on one another's Instagram, which of course is the assertion of control by the narcissist and the supine codependent behaviours of Will Smith as an empath. Possibly the weirdest moment of that now infamous Oscars night was at the Vanity Fair party afterwards, when everyone assumed Smith would be licking his wounds at home. Instead, the whole Smith clan turned up, and Smith cleared the dance floor by dancing to his own song, Getting Jiggy Wheel It. As a family statement, it felt like defiance. We are a very tight-knit group. We ride hard for each other, she says. Jaden started acting in his dad's films, such as The Pursuit of Happiness and The Karate Kid, from the age of 8. Willow announced at age 7 she wanted to be a pop star, and because her parents are who they are, she became one. She was signed to Jay-Z's label and released a mega hit, Whip My Hair, in 2010. She was about to go on a world tour and star in the remake of Annie when she tearfully told her parents she didn't want to do any of it. After some reluctance on their part, they agreed. I think it wasn't easy for my children, living an isolated life, behind gates and always with security, she says, cognitive empathy. Did she have any concerns about putting them in the spotlight from such a young age? She doesn't hesitate. No. What does she think about all the recent conversations around Nepo babies? Hollywood kids who owe their careers to their famous parents. She flicks her hand. People can have any conversation they want about Nepo babies, go for it. Willow has since gone back to music and Jaden is a rapper. The last film he made with his father was 2013 schlocky sci-fi After Earth, which many critics claimed was inspired by the teachings of Scientology. There have long been questions about the Smiths' connections to the church. In 2008, they founded a school in Calabasas, the New Village Leadership Academy, based on an education methodology developed by L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes' daughter Suri attended the school. In Worthy, Pinkett Smith insists she is not a Scientologist. Yet Jacqueline Olivier, who co-founded the academy, has said there were pictures of Hubbard in the classrooms. Is that true? That is very wrong, Pinkett Smith laughs. The school shut in 2013. There are also reports saying the couple donated more than $100,000 to the church, I say. We might have given money to the church, definitely, but based on specific programs. I think it was for the 9/11 firefighters, she says. She writes that working on Collateral in 2004 was a wonderful opportunity to become good friends with Tom Cruise. Was it Cruise who introduced her to the church? Bzzzt, she says, making the sound of a wrong buzzer on a game show. I was actually introduced to Scientology way before, but I'm not going to say who by, because one thing I don't need is the pitchforks going in that direction. These days, Pinkett Smith describes herself as a spiritual seeker, grandiosity, magical thinking, and when she learns I am Jewish, she tells me how much she loves Yom Kippur, mirroring. But what she really enjoys is the intense psychedelic which she has taken with her kids, lack of boundary recognition, and Smith. I think it has brought him a lot of clarity. Plant medicines are very healing, helping you to see you don't have to hold on to certain things, she says. Some have suggested that Smith has become a pariah in Hollywood since the Oscars. She says the two of them are very busy with work, but she can't talk about it due to the actors' strikes. Is she dating anyone? Hell no, she says. The one thing I realised in this whole journey, and through all the difficulties I've been through with Will, is that my dynamic with him is my greatest teacher in terms of healing. So that is my focus. Once again, we see the grandiosity with regard to this talking about healing. She continues by stating, I have to be honest, me falling for Will Smith was very unexpected. From afar, and even after meeting him a couple of times in the Hollywood whirl, I concluded that Will Smith would never have been on my radar, only because he was so cheerful. That was a sticking point. Cheerful didn't represent itself as deep. This demonstrates her pretentiousness. And my young mind believed a troubled person was a deep person. To my surprise, Will proved to be one of the most complex individuals I'd ever meet. We had more in common than I could have imagined, but it was his irresistible charm that stole my heart, and in time, that of the world. And here we are, after 8 months of his unstoppable charm offensive on Thanksgiving Day in Jamaica. Everything has been a blur, from our first jaunt that began, where are we going? You'll see, pack a bag, oh, a private jet. This was before everybody in Hollywood had to have their own private aeroplane on standby for spur-of-the-moment weekends in paradise. With the heat of rum punch starting to surge through my veins, I'm thinking back to how Will managed to wear down my defences early in our courtship. Now, I should imagine here that it was actually a case of it being the other way around. Or, if it's accurate in what she's saying, she would have given him a little and then backed off, drawing him in. And as a consequence of his own addiction to the narcissist, this resulted in him seeking to charm and persuade her because she proved a very tempting prospect to him as a consequence of his addiction to the narcissist. On our very first date, we were sitting at a restaurant having a fierce debate over dinner. Will pointed to his glass as a visual component to understanding perception. You see that glass? It's to the right from where you're sitting. He waited for me to agree, and I did, but from where I'm sitting, it's on my left. I had never thought about things that way at the tender age of 23. The point he was conveying was that learning to understand someone else's perception by putting yourself in their position is a powerful skill. Nobody around me at the time was thinking that deeply. I admit it felt great to be courted by the most skilled man at courtship on the planet. Notice her grandiosity. If anybody's going to pull me, it's going to be the man who's the best at courtship because I'm so special. He was never hesitant to take on the status quos in Hollywood, set up for black men and women of colour as well. He broke the rules that were entrenched by Hollywood's ignorance of the broad reach of black talent. He broke rules so effortlessly, it would set him in a league of his own. And you know what I found to be so gangster about that? He did it with a smile. I respected that a lot. I also respected that he could make me laugh like no other. He could sometimes, only sometimes, be hilariously silly. I did not find him as consistently funny as others, but when he did make me laugh, he knew it was genuine and made a sport out of having me literally, and I mean literally, rolling on the floor. Backhanded compliment. Will was a guy who could be comfortable in the hood or at the White House and everywhere in between. He had the ability to spread his arms wide and promise you that the world was his oyster, and he was going to give you all the pearls it had to offer. Now, her behaviour here is essentially trying to make it seem as if she was the rabbit caught in the headlights of his charm offensive. There's no doubt that Will Smith is charming. Nevertheless, she's trying to portray herself almost as a kind of victim who was unable to escape the ensnarement that he was engaging in, when in actual fact he was being romantic and was trying to forge a relationship with her. Those are the observations that come from the interview, but it's worth going below the line to see some observations. Catherine Conroy. No, I just can't make myself warm to this woman. I read the Pamela Anderson interview a few months back and was quite taken with her lovely personality. Interviews with various ex-Spice Girls were enjoyable, and Dawn French last week was very interesting, but here, no, nothing. Tobias Collison, vile, awful woman. David Ellis, awful woman, not a chance I'm reading this article. Peter Watson, she puts it about. No, Jay Snooks, behind every successful man is a vile witch. Howard Gooden, joined up on intelligence. Nicholas Farrell, 3 paragraphs and gave up. No substance. Yvonne Leonard, is there a copy of this literary tome in English? Deepak Puri, I'm not sure how we can believe anything she says. She's an actress, someone who's paid to pretend to be something else, less than upfront about her marriage while claiming to be authentic, and she's got a book to sell. A. Spencer, she's a very scary lady. I'd be terrified interviewing her. She looked so cross during the Oscars ceremony. If looks could kill. It gives you a fair indication of the way that people see her, and that she's certainly not popular, and that comes from the Times readership alongside the social media backlash that she has experienced. You see the deluded way that she looks at the world, placing herself on a pinnacle of self-importance, believing herself to be superior to all others. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.